Welcome back to the kitchen of Progressively Raw Wellness, Sprouting for Life. This is part 2 of 2, where part 1 was the practical application, where I took you into the kitchen and demonstrated how to grow beautiful, life-filled sprouts. And if you haven't watched section 1 yet, then please do, for your greatest success and endeavors in growing your own sprouts at home. Today, in part 2, what we're going to be doing is talking more about the healthful benefits of eating sprouts. We're going to discuss what are sprouts, the 10 reasons to love sprouts, the impressive nutrient panel, enzymes, chlorophyll, what to sprout, equipment needed, troubleshooting, tips and tricks, meal ideas, and where to purchase supplies. So let's start out with the beginning. What are sprouts? Sprouts are a little tiny seed that stores all of its energy just waiting for that moment of opportunity when it is placed into the soil or soaked in water, just waiting to flourish its life. They are the easiest, fastest, most nutritious, cheapest, and freshest vegetable one can grow. If we compare that to a head of lettuce or any other vegetable that grows that we may get from across the country or even a different country, from the time that vegetable is cut to the time that it goes into storage, waits for transportation, is transported to the grocery store, you may get it several days later, you purchase it, it goes into your refrigerator for several days until it ends up on your plate. That may be very easily a good couple of weeks, it might be a month, 6 weeks, and for some produce it may even be a year, depending on what it is. Most things today are very prolific around the globe. We can get a lot of different produce that comes from a lot of different places around the continents even, and that things have been transported for thousands of miles in conditions that are unknown, where in sprouts we know exactly what their lifespan has been. All their little life force is compacted into the little tiny plants at the prime of their life. They are superfoods and they're versatile. In these little plants, the research shows that the younger the plant, that the more nutritious and powerful that it is. Sprouts are so nutritious that they are actually considered a superfood and a food medicine. It's meaning that we are using food as our medicine for cancer prevention, for prevention, reversal, and maintenance of many disease processes, for chronic disease. One of the things that we found that took the world by storm in 1992 was when a researcher from Johns Hopkins University actually found sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is a specific compound found in cruciferous vegetables and is extremely high in broccoli sprouts. This was found to reduce cancer fighting, if someone already had cancer, and they found that when plants are younger, about 5 days old, that's when they are at their most powerful, nutrient-dense capacity. Because what happens is we have these little tiny sprouts that are only 5 days old. This side is alfalfa, this side is red clover. And at 5 days, you have all of the nutrients packed in this little tiny one sprout that is going to grow into a larger plant, just like these. This side is red cabbage, and this is a broccoli blend, brassica blend, which has several different kinds. So one of these cabbage sprouts is going to grow into a cabbage. But yet here in this little tiny sprout, we have all of the nutrients that we would get in an adult cabbage head. And then when we combine and eat hundreds of these all in one meal, we are getting that maximum nutrients in the smallest amount of package. There's been lots of research done on sprouts, especially sulforaphane, and in the broccoli sprouts, they have just littered the research, major medical journals over the last many years. But we even know since before 1992 that sprouts are healthy even from Bible times. For example, we take Nebuchadnezzar from the time of Daniel in chapter 4. Most of us know the story of what happened. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. Daniel interpreted it for him, which basically said that if he doesn't change his evil ways, that he will go mad, and then God will put him into the field where he will eat grass for 7 years with the oxen. Nebuchadnezzar did not change his ways. He went mad, sure enough, just as the prophecy predicted, and God sent him out to go eat grass with the oxen for 7 years. This word grass is interesting because it translates into tender grass or young grass. It's green and it sprouts. So for 7 years, Nebuchadnezzar ate sprouts, a major detoxer, a major diet that is cleansing to our whole body. When we break it down, he was eating local, organic, fresh, living food, along with every single day, because he lived outside, he was getting fresh air, exercise, sunshine. He was practicing temperance every day. He was going to sleep with the sun, waking up with the sun. And all of these lifestyle principles lead to a cleansing of our blood, our mind, and our body. And ultimately, what happens is it's a lot easier to find the true God, which is what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. Because then at the end of chapter 4, in verses 34 and 36, he says, "And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes up to heaven, and mine eyes and mine understanding returned unto me. At the same time, my reason returned to me." So after 7 years of being on a major detox diet and lifestyle program, completely ordained by God, living outside, living on sprouts for 7 years, his reasoning came back to him. He found God, and the wonderful thing about God is that he reinstated him. I thought that was a beautiful story. So let me share 10 reasons to love sprouts. First of all, when it comes to enzymes, which is the staff of life, sprouts have 10 to 100 times more enzymes than their raw fruits and vegetable counterparts. When it comes to nutrients, sprouts have 10 to 30 times more nutrients than their adult raw vegetable counterpart. Buckwheat, peas, sunflower sprouts all have 30 times, this isn't percent, but this is times more nutritious than the adult version. And again, these sprouts are local, organic, they're always in season because you're always growing them. They're high quality, they're inexpensive, they're easy, quick, easy to digest. They are oxygen rich, meaning that sprouts are one of the very few foods that actually puts oxygen into our body. They are easily grown by the young and the old. It doesn't matter if you're living in the suburbs, if you're in the country, or if you're in a high rise, and it doesn't even matter if your high rise has few windows or small windows and you're north facing, because sprouts don't need and don't like direct sunlight. They more prefer an indirect light. Anyone can perfect the skill of growing sprouts. There's no pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, there's no excitotoxins, acrylamides, there's no trans fats, steroids, hormones, artificial colorings or flavorings, no preservatives, no fumigation, there's nothing genetically modified. as long as you're getting the proper sprouts, that is, they're organic, there's no MSG, radiation, pasteurization, the Maillard effect, or carcinogens. The Maillard effect I've talked about in another video on dehydrating, so you can actually get some of that information there, but the Maillard effect is the browning effect that happens when your bread turns brown, for example, or your cookies turn brown, or if you're going to sear a steak, or any browning action that is caused by heat. Those are often carcinogenic. And there are over 50 carcinogens associated with heating our food, and sprouts are not heated, completely raw and delicious. There is also, if this isn't one of the greatest aspects, is that there's no weeding needed. These are just beautifully grown, no weeds, everything's edible. And literally, watering only takes 1 to 2 minutes a day. 1 minute in the morning, 1 minute in the evening time, 12 hours apart, and you're good. And I would ask that if you don't have 1 minute in the morning and 1 minute in the evening time to water, and you're so busy, you may want to reconsider your schedule a little bit to slow things down, because these little guys are so worth the short amount of effort and the little amount of effort that they take in order to grow. They are a very inexpensive investment that is returns multiple fold, such as 1 tablespoon of seeds makes between 2 and 3 cups of sprouts, depending on what they are. Red cabbage maybe 1 cup, but anywhere between 1 and 3 cups. But this is 1 tablespoon on this side, and this is 1 tablespoon on this side. The same with the alfalfa and the red clover. They are just 1 tablespoon, and we get all of that food, and I generally will eat 1 side per meal. So it's a very high yield. They are also cheap enough that if you ruin a batch for whatever reason, then they are cheap enough that you can just throw them away and start over. And experience does become our best teacher. These little guys contain the highest concentrated sources of vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and enzymes of all foods with the fewest calories. So let's take a look at that impressive nutrient panel. Now, these are just on average. All these sprouts and microgreens have a little bit different, but they're all in the general ballpark of each other. So generally 1 cup of leafy sprouts, which would be, for example, any of these, on average, I would say has about 28 calories. And if you count grams, has 3 grams of protein, 3 grams of carbs, and 0.5 grams of fat. And if you count percentages, that comes out to 43% protein, which is unheard of. And most people have no idea that plant foods are so filled with protein. Carbs are 43% and 14% fat. And again, people don't think of sprouts as having fat. And the wonderful thing about sprouts too is that they have 0 trans fats, which clog our arteries, and no cholesterol. 1 cup of pea shoots, which are more considered a microgreen rather than a sprout. A sprout is more defined as grown with water. Microgreen and also 3 to 5, 6 days, where microgreens are generally known to be grown in soil or on a baby's blanket, something like this. You could grow it on grass. It's pressed grass. And a lot of you have asked where I get some of my supplies, so I will share that with you as we go. But I happen to get these at Mum's. It's a Canadian company, and if you're from the US, then they do have a minimum amount that if you call them and order a minimum amount, then you get free shipping. But the baby blanket is not messy, and it's wonderful to use. The pea shoots or microgreens are generally around 177 calories, 10 grams of protein, which is a considerable amount. 32 grams of carbs, 1 gram of fat, 3 grams of fiber, and that turns out to be 23% of protein, 72% carbs, 5% fat. So you can see that as plants grow, then their percentage of protein goes down and their carbs go up a little bit. In general, their protein is about 23 to 40%. There are many that are even more than that. Some of them can go up to 70% or higher. In general, there's about 8 to 70 calories per cup of sprouts, and that equates to about 150 calories per pound. This is good news if somebody wants maximum nutrients with the fewest amount of calories. They've got 0 cholesterol, no saturated fat, no trans fats. They are low in fat, but appropriately in fat, and they're very high in dietary fiber. Vitamin C ranges anywhere from 11 to 60% of our daily value, and our iron 4 to 10% of our daily value. Sprouts are generally filled with magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, selenium, zinc, B1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, folate, copper, vitamin A, C, K, calcium, and omega-3, and all of the amino acids. And I always try to get multiple sprouts per meal. So I may pull a little bit out of the clover, a little bit out of the alfalfa, out of the broccoli brassica, which has, I believe, 4 different kinds, and red cabbage. And plus, I have a multitude usually of growing at the same time. And I'll grab a little bit here, a little bit there, and that way I know I've got everything. If we eat enough sprouts to maintain our weight in calories, we could actually live off of sprouts alone. They have all of the amino acids and the proteins that we need, and the appropriate omega-3 and everything. In 3 to 6 days, the B vitamins alone increase from 300 to 1,500% in just 5 days. And all of these are about 5 days old. The sulforaphane producing capacity for 1 pound of broccoli is equivalent to 100 pounds of adult broccoli. So I love to eat the sprouts where I can get all of those nutrients just jam-packed into one little tiny plant here, and I know that I am getting everything that I need. These sulforaphanes are the top cancer-fighting compound found in cruciferous vegetables. And you can find all sorts of stuff on the internet about sulforaphane, as well as on YouTube. It's in books, it's in research, and it is peppered everywhere now. There are several important things that are a constituent of sprouts. One of those are enzymes. The enzymes are the staff of life. They are the foundation of all of our life. They run every single function of our body, and they are the catalyst for minerals to create reactions in our body. For example, if I'm moving my finger, it takes enzymes. If I'm moving my arm, it takes enzyme. If I'm smelling something, tasting something, if I'm thinking, if my heart is beating, my liver is working, my blood is flowing, everything in my body takes enzymes. And enzymes are molecules then that speed up almost every single chemical reaction in our cells. But without them, everything becomes sluggish, and eventually, if we have none, life ceases. Enzymes don't get used up. They are unique in a way because they don't get used up in the process of the chemical reactions, but they morph and they transform. So if our body needs a reaction in a certain place in our body, then our body will make and create what it needs for the enzyme, and then that enzyme will be sent to that particular place in the body. Each enzyme has its own particular duty to do. And there are about 75,000 enzymes that we know of right now, and it continues to go up. And we continue to always find more things that enzymes are doing in our body. The cure of any disease is due to enzyme activity. It is extremely anti-aging, but they are very heat sensitive. Pasteurization, however, kills all enzymes, where pasteurization occurs at about 145 degrees Fahrenheit. Man is in its own category all by itself, meaning that we are the only species that indulges in an enzyme-less diet, where it aids in digestion, metabolism, and every function of our body. There are three classes of enzymes. There's metabolic, digestive, and food. And they all do something different. Metabolic enzymes are what runs our body and every single tissue and organ in our body. And 98 of those enzymes alone work together in a very particular way just in our arteries. And if there's 98 just in our arteries, imagine how many enzymes are needed to run our brain, our lungs, our kidneys, or our heart. There are hundreds that come together when we need damage repair or when there's decay in our body, which is normal. We have breakdown and rebuilding every single moment of every single day of our life, and we need this enzyme activity. We need enzymes to heal disease. The second kind of enzyme are digestive enzymes. These are the foods that our body creates to digest foods. They have three jobs: to digest protein, carbohydrates, and fats. The protease breaks down protein, amylase breaks down carbohydrates, and lipase breaks down fats. Our body generally makes about 12 digestive enzymes, and those enzymes work harder and utilize more energy to make and create and use than our body uses in order to make hundreds of metabolic enzymes to keep all of our tissues and organs functioning properly. The interesting thing about digestion is that our body either digests or it heals. It can't do both at the same time. Most of us don't really think about the grueling process that goes on with digestion. There is a lot of activity that goes on with digestion. It's a very difficult process, but when we are eating really well in the way that we should, it minimizes the effort that our body takes in order to digest. When we are eating poorly, we're eating 3, 4, 5, 6 meals a day, we're eating in between our meals, we can quickly see that the amount of hours that our digestion is working has been really reduced, because our stomach and digestion needs to stop and rest, and once it's at resting stage, then our body can go out to do healing. But it can't do both at the same time. So eating 3 meals a day, allowing 5 to 6 hours in between each meal really is ideal. And for some people who don't do a lot of activity, 2 meals may be better for you. And then that's just that many more hours that our body can actually work for us to break down disease or to heal disease and take care of decay and everything else. It's a natural detoxification process when we learn to work with our body rather than against it. The third classification of enzymes are our food enzymes. So it's not produced in our body, but it actually comes with the food that we are eating if it's in its raw state. Once it gets above 118, the enzymes start to die. Some of them start to die at about 109. So we want to keep our food. We can eat our food above room temperature, but not by too much. If you want to focus on really keeping those enzymes intact. Raw foods, for example, take a raw apple, an orange, a banana, a carrot, sprouts. These are unique in a way because each one of these, each raw food has a specific number of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats in it, like I had just showed in the last slide. And the interesting thing about these plants is that they have the same percentage of protease, amylase, and lipase to break down the protein, carbohydrates, and fats. So our body needs to produce less digestive enzymes when we eat raw foods. Our body is a real workhorse for us if we treat it right. These enzymes are not present in dead food. If it's been cooked, if it has been heated too long, the enzymes are dead. Now, it doesn't mean that there's no nutrient value in some steamed vegetables or a heated fruit soup. It's just that the enzymes are gone. The enzymes are dead, and you lose that benefit. And that's why I like to eat a lot of sprouts and things with enzymes in them. So let's go over some enzyme studies. There are several, there's just, again, the research in major medical journals just are peppered with enzyme studies. One done was a group took rats, and half of them were fed an enzyme-less diet, everything was cooked. Another group took enzyme-rich diet, which was raw. And what they found is that those who were eating a cooked diet without enzymes, their pancreas was 3 times the size of those that were on the enzyme-rich diet. The size of the pancreas has been in indirect proportion to the amount of raw food in the diet. So the more raw food, the more normal the size of the pancreas. The more dead food and enzyme-less food, the larger the pancreas. Another study was done on rats again, where diabetes was induced to them, and just by giving enzyme supplements improved them. Now, this study is very telling, but what it does show is that supplementation can help us as well. Another cruel study was done when researchers took dogs and they drained their pancreatic enzymes. And despite they all had food and water available, within a week they died. And we find that also with humans. And when we have completely a void diet with nothing in it, we may live a little bit longer than a week, but which most of us do, but what happens is an enzyme-less dominoes effect where free radicals are created and one process after another, which creates then oxidation, instability, and then DNA is actually altered because of a poor diet. Saliva in young people, we know, is 30 times stronger than someone who might be 69. And the older we are, the fewer enzymes we have. Enzyme-less diets create undernutrition, even with obesity. Malabsorption, and it opens us up to all sorts of diseases such as diabetes and Crohn's disease and cancer, heart disease, arthritis, premature aging and inflammation, and a host of other chronic diseases. Cooked foods increase our white blood cells, where eating enzyme-rich diets keep our white blood cells normal. Enzymes, as I mentioned, actually alter our gene expression. They regulate major cell functions, and they also repair damaged DNA. So if there's been some kind of disease process in our body that has occurred and we are trying to reverse it or improve it, then we can eat an enzyme-rich diet to improve that condition. I don't know of any condition that is not improved by adding more live food. The enzyme potential can be increased by supplementation, as I mentioned, and should come from eating more raw foods, which leads me into the grocery store foods and enzymes. A lot of people don't realize that when we purchase frozen foods from a grocery store, all of those enzymes have been killed. And that's done on purpose, and pasteurization is generally done at 145. The enzymes are either killed by blanching, steaming, or fumigation, or of a variety of ways to pasteurize food. And much of it may need to be pasteurized for safety, but if we are growing our own foods, there is no reason. The reason that most manufacturers also, not just for safety, but also pasteurize their food is because when food is immediately frozen, the enzymes start the breakdown process. It's a lot slower if it's frozen or in the refrigerator, as you know, because if something sits out on the counter, it will go bad a lot faster than if it's in the fridge, and even slower if it's put in the freezer. So this just makes sense, and manufacturers want to retain the color for as long as possible, and they want to extend the shelf life for as long as possible. The food industry is a profit-driven industry where their sole purpose is profit. It's not health, even though there are some companies out there. I'm talking about the global big picture here. I'm not talking about the individual companies that are trying to help the health of our world. But when we start to look at prepared foods, I think that's pretty well understood that there's no enzymes in there. Anything that's a TV dinner, prepared food, you just throw it in the oven or microwave, those foods are enzyme-less. But you may have a question about frozen strawberries, frozen blueberries, frozen vegetables, frozen broccoli, cauliflower, where there's nothing added. There's no salt, there's no oil, it's considered raw. Yes, those foods are also enzyme-less. Those foods also are pasteurized to kill the enzymes, again, for a longer shelf life and to retain the color. What I like to do is meet my local farmers, and during the proper season, I like to buy in bulk and freeze everything myself. Nothing gets blanched, nothing gets steamed, nothing gets fumigated. I put things right into containers to store, and then it goes right into the freezer to use for the next year. I'm not interested in freezing my food for beyond a year. I'm just interested in freezing until the next season comes around. So I don't have to worry about retaining color for another few years down the road or extending the shelf life. One of the other wonderful things about sprouts, in addition to the enzymes, is chlorophyll. Chlorophyll and enzymes are so beneficial to our health. They really should be on the package of all of the nutritional panels that are on foods. And some of the foods that probably need the nutritional panel on them the most don't have nutritional panels. So I think a lot of people have a tendency to overlook the healthful value of fresh produce. There's no labels anywhere. There's nothing to remind us of how much value these are, how much vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals and antioxidants and bioflavonoids and enzymes and chlorophyll. And there's nothing to continually remind us how wonderful these things are to us, but yet we're always reminded on the packaged foods. Chlorophyll is the lifeblood of plants, just as hemoglobin is the life of our blood. Chlorophyll improves our health. It boosts our immune system, it slows our aging, it improves mental clarity, it's very detoxifying, as we had learned even in the Nebuchadnezzar diet and in some of the research. Chlorophyll foods are very easy to digest. They're alkaline forming in the body, and they are considered biogenic, meaning living foods. These sprouts are biogenic. Life begets life. So as I eat life, and I am eating these sprouts as they are still living in these trays, and then I make that life part of me. So this life imparts life to my body. Chlorophyll is nature's greatest healer and is the foundation of all living plant life. Chlorophyll purifies the liver, it neutralizes toxins, it cleans up the blood, and it builds up the blood, it manages blood sugar fluctuations, and it goes deep into our cells for cleansing. And it increases the enzymes in our body, and our body doesn't have to work as hard when we actually eat live and living foods, raw foods that have enzymes in them. It's much, much gentler on our digestive system. So where do we get chlorophyll? Really from anything that's green. We get it from sprouts are filled with chlorophyll, parsley is filled with chlorophyll, cress, broccoli, arugula, marine phytoplankton, chlorella, spirulina, wheatgrass juice, barley grass juice, all leafy greens and green plant foods. Now this could include anything that's green, green olives, green peppers, asparagus, anything that's green. When we have, for example, a green pepper, that is very filled with chlorophyll, but if we let it ripen longer and longer, that chlorophyll actually starts to break down in the pepper, and then it starts to turn yellow, orange, or red, whatever shade it will. And what is happening there is the chlorophyll starts to break down, and the antioxidants in it actually starts to build. And there's different antioxidants that create different colors of peppers or different colors of all of our vegetables. So there's different antioxidants in red cabbage as there is in green cabbage, and different antioxidants that are in yellow or red or orange bell peppers. When we buy, if we're going to start getting into sprouts, I do want to say that if you're going to purchase them, and that's fine, you can, but they're very expensive if you purchase them on your own, and it'll run your pocketbook dry in no time. Literally, this is only 1 tablespoon of seeds, and it only costs probably 15 to 25 cents, depending on the seed. Very, very inexpensive. But if you buy them from the store, they're going to be very, very pale. Don't eat those right away because you want the chlorophyll in them. They don't have the nutrient pack that we need in order for our body to utilize and heal. So rinse the package when you get home. You can put it in a container of water. Dump out all the water, kind of shake off all the water droplets, put it onto a plate with a paper towel, and then put it in indirect sunlight for the next probably 2 days. That's been my experience if I have ever purchased them from the grocery store, that I have to leave them sitting out for a couple of days in an indirect light. Then they green up really nicely and then eat them. But the pale sprouts are really not full of the nutrition that you would hope that they do. Eat them as they're vibrantly green. If we're looking at the enzyme bank and our chlorophyll bank, and we're trying to reverse or prevent disease, or trying to manage a disease, then ideally we should start looking at moving our diet to an 80% raw, 20% cooked, and working ourselves up to about a 50% of our meal as sprouts. And I attended Hippocrates Health Institute a few years ago and really enjoyed their program for about 3.5 weeks. I have not seen that kind of healing in anybody in any cooked food program. People were healing, and I've been to several plant-based programs as well, and I've also taught it. But when I went to Hippocrates and saw the power of what 50% of our food as sprouts can do for us, I was totally amazed, and I was hooked from that moment on. I do a lot of sprouting, except in the summertime. I'm not as diligent to sprout because there's all this fresh produce that either I'm growing or is available through my local farmers, and I like to eat local and organic and in season as much as I can. So I will generally save my sprouting for the off produce months. And so generally, if you want more healing potential, then having about 4 cups of sprouts per day would be an ideal. And also chlorophyll and sprouts are wonderful for your pets too, and your iguanas. Iguanas will love them. So what do we sprout? We can sprout from microgreens, sunflowers, pea shoots, buckwheat, but don't juice buckwheat. That'll cause some tingling in your lips, and that'll go away, but just don't juice them. We can also grow grains such as quinoa, oats, popcorn, and wheatgrass. Our bodies don't have the enzymes to break down the grass for wheatgrass, so we have to juice it. Wheatgrass juice is filled with chlorophyll and healing potential. We can sprout beans and legumes such as lentils, garbanzos, mung beans, peanuts. Other beans are not so great, but we can soak them ahead of time and then cook them. Sprouts of the green type, there's so many different kinds. You can get clover, alfalfa, broccoli, radish, green kale, kohlrabi, Swiss chard, beets. You can get mixes, as you see here in the picture: garlic, onion, leeks, cabbage, fenugreek, turnip. And then there's the gelatinous seeds, which are the arugula, the chia, and the flax. Now, many of you asked where I get my seeds. There are all sorts of places on the internet to get them. You can get them from grocery stores. As you can see, I get mine from Mums. They are Canadian-based, and they often do a lot of the supplying to other stores. So that's just, and I'll give you some information as I end here. So what are you going to need? Now, I do a lot of sprouting, so I don't expect you to get this much. I'm preparing for a sprouting class here in this picture, so don't get overwhelmed. But if you start with at least one, start with 1 tower of sprouts, or this is a biosta. You can also get, these are Sprout Masters, and these are my favorite. They are compact, they're easy, they have the less mold, and if there's a pre-mold, it's easy to take care of. If you're out camping and you are trying to grow them, you can just get a little mesh over them, and they can still get the sunlight, they can still get the fresh air. Pull it tight instead of putting the lid on where you're going to close off the sunlight to the chlorophyll potential. You can also use little jars like this. Now, some of you may want to use quart jars, quart mason jars. That's totally fine. I got these from Mums again, and these grow beautiful sprouts as well. And the only downfall about this growing in a jar is after about 4 days, I do take the sprouts out. I put them into a bowl, a large bowl of water. I cover the sprouts, and then I gently break them apart in order to separate them all. And then I pour out the water, shake off the excess water drips, and then I will put them back in here, because otherwise the only part that gets the chlorophyll, the sunlight, is on the outside. So here, if I were to take these out, you'll see that these are nice and green all the way through. And then I like to just put them on an angle here to make sure that all the water can drip off, because when if there's too much water, then they actually can start to mold. And you can just put, now this is a mesh cover on it, and you can just put a plate or something on top of it if you're going to put it in the refrigerator, because you don't want them to dry out. Another reason that I actually take them out of this jar is because of the little pods. And those are the pods where the seeds grew from, and they're edible, but sometimes they can rot. So I just like to take them out from these jars. It's a little bit extra work than these, but to me it works just as well. These are absolutely my favorite. This type is more like a greenhouse. It's got a solid base, and then it's got a top with some holes in it. And if you're going to do microgreens or even gelatinous sprouts, you can put this little baby blanket on it, and they come pre-cut, from Mum's at least, they come pre-cut, specific for this particular sprouter. And then you can put it together, and now you've got a little greenhouse effect. A lot of the gelatinous sprouts do need some kind of a greenhouse effect. Whether you put it on a plate with non-bleached paper towel and let them grow up on that, you still will need to put a plastic bag or something over it. So this is really nice, and it's a good size as well. Another good piece of equipment to have is a sprayer nozzle on your faucet. If you only have just the faucet water that comes down in one stream, those can really do some damage to these tender sprouts, because you're always making sure that you don't break off the root, because if the root breaks off, then that can start to create mold as well. Nozzles can be found anywhere. You can get them at a local hardware store. You can get them at Home Depot. There's lots of places you can get them. They're inexpensive. So you definitely want one that will equalize out the spray and come down more like a shower rather than just one big stream. And of course, this does not take a lot of space. They stack on top of each other very nicely. You can put them in the refrigerator like that. In part one, I actually go through how to refrigerate them, and with the words on the top will allow a little bit of space in between the tray to, that's the way I like to store it. I like to allow a little bit of airflow in the roots, and then I put another tray on top. They do like to be grown in indirect light. If they are grown in sunlight, if they're in the sunlight for a couple of minutes, it's fine. But if sun continues to beat down on them, they get too dry and they will wilt and die quickly. And then of course the seeds. You're going to want to get some really good high quality seeds. And in the previous picture you saw all the different ones that I have. This is only some of the ones that I have. I didn't even bring all of them for this picture. But there's arugula, caraway, there's a brassica blend, a spring mix, there's broccoli, green kale, red cabbage, all different kinds. And make sure that they are organic, that they are not sprayed, and also make sure that they are grown to be sprouts. So some tips and tricks. I go through some of these tips and tricks in part one as well, but the key to successful sprouting really is just having proper water, temperature, and airflow. Do not grow them in direct sunlight. If you need better airflow, if you're having problems with pre-mold is very easy to take care of. Just put it under your faucet and stream it, and it rinses right away. And sometimes you may have pre-mold for a couple of days, but generally after that second day, it doesn't come back again. So you can also help that with changing the temperature, making sure that it's not in the hottest place in your house. If it's the summertime, move it to a cooler place, and if it's in the winter, move it to a warmer place. They are live plants, so they do like to have a water temperature that is appropriate as well. If it's cold in the house, they like to have a little bit warmer water to be rinsed with. If it's warm in the house, they need a little cooler water. If you're going to store them in the refrigerator, it's no problem. I have left sprouts in my refrigerator for up to 2 weeks before when I've had to leave, and I've not had any problems with them at all. But you don't want to put them into the refrigerator wet or really too damp. And what I do, if I just water this and I have to run and I realize that I do have to put them in the fridge, then I'll set a paper towel underneath the roots and just set it on there gently. Let the paper towel wick up all of the moisture, and then I will put it in the refrigerator. But you generally want to allow 2 to 6 hours to pass after rinsing before storing them in the refrigerator. You can store, there's this is another type of sprouter, and you can keep this in the refrigerator as well. This also offers a little greenhouse effect. It's got some holes on the bottom. You can just put that right in the base, and it allows some airspace here for the drippings, and then the lid has water holes as well. And I just store it in the refrigerator just like this. This one is called a Sprout Tomo, S-P-R-O-U-T-A-M-O, Sprout Tomo. And I like to use that as well. These are really easy to travel with. In fact, all the sprouts are really easy to travel with. I've traveled cross country with these before. They are very easy to grow and keep in hotels, and I have had live food even while I'm traveling. So you just get creative, and where there's a will, there's a way. So there's a variety of sprouts that I had just showed you. My equipment. This is my equipment growing. Now this window here is, this actually is an indirect light. That is an outside window, but there is another room. It's a covered patio on the other side of that window. So that's why they're actually in the window there. And they take up a lot less space there. But look how many sprouts I can grow in that small amount of space. The gelatinous seeds need to go onto a non-bleach paper towel or baby's blanket, as well as brown flax and psyllium. Now here I was experimenting with some sunflower microgreens. I did not grow those in soil, but I was just experimenting. It actually worked pretty well, and then I was able to juice them there on the right hand side, and that is actually grown in just a regular biosta, and it worked well. The only thing is that it did stain the bottom, not that it matters, but it did stain the bottom of both the biosta, and I also tried it in the tray as well. These are on the left is pea shoots and buckwheat microgreens. On the right, there's buckwheat. On the top right are sunflower shoots, and on the bottom are pea shoots. And those again are in the Sprout Master. Just doing a little experimentation, just seeing what works and what doesn't work, and it actually worked really well. Again, it stained the bottom pretty bad, but you know, I use these all the time. I don't buy them for their prettiness, I buy them for their practicalness. And here they are on my sprout tower, grown on actually the baby blanket. So you can see that those pea shoots up on the top, those are probably a good 6 to 7 inches tall, as the same as the buckwheat on the bottom. And there they are on the tower there. So this is what I was saying, that these are 3 days old for alfalfa sprouts. The lid has just come off, and I explained that in detail in the first program, where this is number 2. And you don't want to be eating sprouts that look like this. You want them to sit in the sun then for 2 or 3 days until they're nice and green. These do not have any chlorophyll. This is that window that I was explaining. It may look like there's direct sunlight coming in, but it's actually from a room window, that the other window to the outside is probably at least 10 feet away, if not 12 feet. But it's quite far, so that sunshine coming in is very indirect. And you can see on the far left, or on the far right, I should start with that, is the oldest of the trays has been in the open to indirect light for a day longer than the one in the middle, which is a day longer than the one on the right, or on the left, sorry. This is the sprout tomo that I showed you there. And if I'm going to be dehydrating my sprouts for a super powder, then I actually will sprout them like this and put them on my tower. And it's very easy for me to even go through this amount of sprouts just to eat fresh, because I generally eat about 1 tray per meal, if not maybe even 1.5 or 2, depending on what I'm using them with. I had shared that I was at Hippocrates Health Institute, and I was allowed in their greenhouse. And so these are a couple of pictures that I took, and where they recommend 50% of your diet to be sprouts. And these here on the left are, that is wheatgrass, and on the right are buckwheat. This has become one of my favorite sprouts of all time. This is garlic chives. This is grown in a biosta, but these are very slow growers, but they're very mild and they're very delicious. They go wonderful on sandwiches, if you want to put them on top of soups or whatever you would like. They're very mild, so don't think that they're going to be overpowering. So how to use sprouts? Let's look at some ideas. And how do we incorporate them into our diet? Let's start with the green sprouts first. So these would be green sprouts. You can have sprout salad. You can stuff these into peppers, mushrooms, nori wraps, rice paper, tomatoes. You can put them in smoothies. You can use them as a base for toppings. You can juice them, except the buckwheat you can't juice. You can make them into crackers or pile them high onto crackers. You can put them into sandwiches or on veggie patties. You can top your soups, use nuts as a salad topper, pie crust, crumble topping. You can also put it in chia puddings, pudding in soups, make it with hummus, wraps, and you can feed your dog, cat, or iguana again. For non-greens, you can make nut milk, and I actually gave you a recipe in the dehydrating class for that. It's basically 1/2 to 1/4 or 1/4 to 1/2 a cup of nuts, 4 cups of water with 4 dates, and you've got homemade inexpensive nut milk. You can make nut creams, veggie nut loaves, dehydrated snacks, nut butters, cookies. You can use them into seed cheeses or yogurt, make them into granola. You can make a sesame spread. You can make them into a milkshake. There's all sorts of things that we can make. Make garbanzos into hummus, or cook them up into steamed something. Yes, the enzymes will be gone, but the nutrients will still be there. Most of them, but yes, some are lost during the cooking process. But we can also put non-green sprouts such as nuts into make a pie crust, or make into a variety of desserts. This is sprouted rice. You add 2/3 of a cup of rice, of wild rice, fill up a mason jar with water, put the lid on, put it in your dehydrator. 24 hours later, you have sprouted rice, and you can make it into a wonderful Mexican dish. So here are just some pictures of things that I do with sprouts. So I'm not really going to give much talk about these. These are nori wraps, rice wraps. I pile high sprouts on crackers and on bread. I use it a lot as a base for my food. So they actually become a part of my main dish, and you can see that that is, each one of those plates there are probably one whole side here. And I pile my sprouts high on everything that I may use. I put them in my smoothies. I even use parsley, very high in chlorophyll. Sprouting and dehydrating often go hand in hand. You sprout seeds and then you dehydrate them. Or you sprout seeds and then you can make them into crackers and all sorts of things. This is a pizza crust or some breakfast breads, scones. So where to purchase supplies. I had already gone to a few of these. I spoke of a few of these. So where to purchase supplies. I get mine from Mums, but there's all sorts of places that you can get them. You might want to take a picture of this so you can have the phone numbers and websites to these places. Most grocery stores will have at least a limited supply of seeds. If you go to a health food store, they'll have more options, and then if you go online, you'll find even more options. Make sure that they're non-GMO and organic and specific to growing sprouts. There's the Mums phone number and web address, which many of you have been asking about. Where do I get my trays? Same place. I call up different places and I find places online. The Sprout Master comes from Life Sprouts, and there's the phone number and web address. I think their web address, their web page right now is down, so you might have to call if it's down or not. In the tower that you saw, you may want to make your own. I got mine from Hippocrates Health Institute in Palm Beach, Florida, so you can call them, and there's their phone number or address.